Oh. Hi everyone, Karen here from Holistic Essentials Therapy and Consulting. I have invited my fabulous coach and mentor and creator of all things Thrive Factor, Shannon Dunn, to have a chat with me today and with you. She is the author of the Thrive Factor and the creator of the Thrive Factor Archetypal Framework. Oh, I've got it around the wrong way.
There's stuff on the back.
I'm like, your beautiful artwork. I haven't done this in gracefully at all. And downloaded and created all of the beautiful images for the 12 Thrive Factor archetypes that are in the Thrive Factor framework. So thanks for playing with me today. It's so nice to have you here.
So happy to be here. And for anyone who's wondering who the fairy sidekick is, this is Archie. Spends a lot of time with me on Zoom. So Karen's very amused to seeing him.
I love Archie, and if I had Hamish in my studio, he would be exactly the same. But
Exactly.
the difference between a long hair and a short hair is a
Very
great deal of hair.
That's another story for another day. Karen can tell you how
It absolutely is. Oh yeah, and yes. Oh yes. and used my shapeshifter alchemist to get there. The reason I wanted to have a chat with you today is I wanted to share with everyone, I guess, the journey of how I and we together, with your support and assistance, brought My Awaken program to life. And I really want to start with, I guess for myself, for me, self-discovery has been a huge quest in my life of really seeking, well, who am I? What makes me who I am? What is my purpose? And why am I here?
So much. And I mean, aren't they universal questions that so many people will ask? There's just some people like you, like myself, like the women that we have in our extended circle, are more on a quest for the answers than others. Yeah, we really want to know and understand and see what that can do for us in our lives.
Yeah. Yes. And and that journey has taken me, into healing modalities, really tapping into my intuition, teaching healing modalities, learning, which I've since discovered is one of my, my beautiful mentor teacher archetype. But I will say, and I guess too, for me, the last 7 years of a massive healing journey for myself have been about how can I accept myself? How can I value myself? How can I love myself? Like that's been a huge part of my reawakening, and it's inverted commas for me because I feel that, I did come into my life being very intuitive, very aware. And, I started my personal journey at the age of 21, which is quite young, and back then it was very young. And
the sort of things that we would now talk about that are commonplace to chat about for so many women, men as well, but very much for women. We would have talked about them back then in our early 20s, but we wouldn't have talked about them with many people. It would have been a tight, close-knit circle of really trusted people.
Well, for me, it was a trusted community, and everyone thought I'd joined a cult. It was like, oh, are you joining a cult? And it's like, I know I'm exploring psychic and mediumship development, but people really saw that. So that's how, I guess, quiet it was. Yeah, it was hidden. You had to be really careful about who you talked about it with. Whereas
even to talk about meditation in some circles was strange. Why would you do that? Yeah. Here we are 30 years later.
And now it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about, which I love and I think is so amazing. And as I look back too, I think it's so indicative of timing being right for birthing new things into this life and into this world and in these current times. And when I discovered, or when I first met you, it was when we were preparing for the Ultimate Girls Week away in Fiji, which was amazing.
So good.
Thank goodness we got to experience that when we did. And I was so drawn to your energy. I was drawn to your wisdom and your knowledge. I had already, I guess, been exposed to the concept of archetypal psychology and archetypes through different people that I'd been drawn to on my journey. But there was something so unique about yours. Firstly, it was for women only, which I loved because, that really resonated with me.
I get asked frequently why I haven't done the boy version or the male version or the men version. As far as I can see, for our lifetime, it will always be only for women. So
I really feel intuitively in that as well, and especially now that I am, a Thrive Factor profiler and coach, I can really feel the depth of the divine feminine throughout that, and that's something that really excites me, is supporting women in reconnecting to that feminine, the divine feminine within. There's a real goddess energy around each of these archetypes as well.
And that there are so many different frameworks, to use a broad term, that are related to profiling or self-understanding or psychology or personality. And I can't say off the top of my head that I have exclusively seen one that's been out there in the community and tried and tested that is purely gender specific. And it wasn't necessarily a deliberate, conscious thing when I created it. It was just, I was mostly working with women at the time, and I didn't even consider that there was anything else but a pure feminine energy coming through. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't look at the archetypes and understand them and see them from the masculine perspective as well, because of course, as we've talked about in different ways, and I know you teach, the masculine and feminine energy is required so that we can have a holistic experience in the world. Doesn't matter what your born gender or your chosen gender is, that's irrelevant. But yeah, for the foreseeable future and for the way it has come to life, the Thrive Factor framework and its 12 archetypes are a feminine energy, and we tend to only profile those that identify as women. And but if somebody else really wanted to do the assessment and do the work, and they didn't identify as female, we would not be closed to that. But it's very feminine focused.
It really is. And I really was drawn to that. I was also drawn to the wisdom and your own experience. You've done a lot of work in business, in leadership. You have, your background in counseling and art therapy and everything else. So to me, there was so much depth. And I know this taps into I know now this taps into my mentor teacher as well.
Because I was seeing mine and getting that magnetism of being drawn to what we can see in others that we either can see or desire to have in ourselves.
Oh, I love that. Yes. And so there was a deep respect for the professionalism involved.
Yeah.
And the work that you yourself have put into creating this amazing framework. And I could see the potential of how that could be woven into all that I am and all that I do, and how it could all come together, I guess, under an umbrella to further support working with women, which is what I love to do, in supporting them and discovering who they are, but valuing themselves. The biggest question I get asked over and over again is, how can I love myself?
Oh.
How do I love myself? That is, and I guess I recognize too that what we heal, we teach, whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
100%.
And that doesn't mean I don't have daily challenges, that I don't have challenges. You've seen my challenges.
Yeah, and you've seen some of mine. But the reality is that, the real, genuine, authentic expression of who you are in the world is what brings that depth and that richness to your teaching. Because the women that you are working with are drawn to you because they get that you understand where they're at, even if you're not there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when we then have a language like we have with the Thrive Factor archetypes. We have a different way to be able to communicate those lessons that we have. And I know this is just one, because you're a shapeshifter alchemist. This is just one of many, many pieces of modality that you bring into your work. But the watching, witnessing, more than watching, witnessing and being an active part of you bringing Awaken to life and immersing yourself in the world of everything Thrive Factor has been such a joy to watch, because you live and breathe your 4 archetypes, which are magnificent. And, you know, for every day that you might have one of them that you maybe want to have a whole breakup with, like it's a bad boyfriend, you have another day where you're like, I love them all so much, and I'm doing this with them, and they're just so supportive. But that's the reality of these different disparate parts of ourselves, is that we are not one identity. We are multifaceted. And for you, it's a different level because of the shapeshifter alchemist. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So anyone who's watching and just doesn't be like, what do they mean? You can explain that one because it's through your lived experience. But we are not just one pure identity. We have different parts of ourselves. And that for me was a really important thing to honor and recognize in creating the framework, and to really draw on a lot of traditional archetypal psychology, which going back to very ancient times, even back then, was like, you're not just one archetype or one thing. You have different parts of you that are expressed in different ways, and those parts can work in harmony together. There also will be times when there's a lot of disharmony, and there might be one archetype that feels like it's being left out and has a bit of a tantrum like a small child, and there could be another archetype that gets all bossy and takes over. Like, this is just these different parts within us, but discovering them, this is the self-discovery piece, gives us that opportunity to better know who we are, to understand where we could have potential challenges and where they could play out as true lived challenges, and what that could look like and feel like and be like in our lives and our work, but also to recognize, to celebrate the strengths that we have, and to look at how we bring them together as a whole to express ourselves in what we refer to in Thrive Factor world as our innate potential.
I love that. And I love that, to many, the shadow aspect of archetypal psychology can be quite confronting.
Very.
And this is where I love that, that the words are so powerful, and they can be so instrumental in embedding beliefs or ideas.
So much.
And so I love that you have really tapped into potential challenges and provided strategies and tools and ways in which we can actually, I guess, not face them, but be able to have conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
With those different aspects. For me, they're conversations with my 4 archetypes. But it was such a relief to not feel as though, and I can see where my shapeshifter alchemist has influenced this. I've always struggled with having a label or being placed into a box or one title. And I never wanted to limit myself by just being pigeonholed into one thing. And when I discovered my 4 archetypes, it really was a relief, because it made so much sense to me, because I was like, oh wow, I can really feel and see where, my advocate rescuer archetype has shown up in my life in a big way. She's been a big driver, and not always in a good way. Yes. Not always in a good way. I looked at her and went, wow, now I understand why I've had so many codependent relationships in my life. Now I understand why I've been so needy in my life and felt, really placed my worth and my value and my identity into the hands of other people, my happiness, my everything, and I've often taught to people, when you rely on other people to validate who you are, or you rely on other people for your happiness, it's literally like you take your heart out of your chest, you place it onto a plate. It's quite graphic, but it's very, symbolic. And you give that to somebody else, and then you say, there you go, thank you. You're now completely responsible for my heart, my happiness, my well-being. And I could really see where, in intuitively teaching that has actually come from my advocate rescuer without realizing that's where that learning and that teaching has actually come from, and that depth of understanding. And
the symbology of that, though, Karen, has said, very powerful, very graphic, but I think sometimes we need to have that visual kind of experience to know that. But the same applies to every single one of the 12 archetypes. There is, when we externalize things and we live really limited, I think is the word, by those potential challenges and let them become challenges, we are going through a process from a psychology kind of perspective that I would talk about is abdicating from self.
Yeah.
We're giving away, and we're, you know, this is where you'll hear people talk about it's their fault, or it's this is, you know, a situation, a person, a place, a group, someone, they blame, like there's a blaming kind of energy. And there, you know, we don't want to go into it too in depth really, because I want to talk about the Awaken program, but you know, when we're doing that,
This excites me.
I know we're not taking full responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that we need to be at our top of our game taking 100% responsibility for ourselves all the time, because that is, you know, it's not unrealistic, but it's a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But being aware of when you are or when you are not taking self-responsibility is really key. And as you said before, like the use of words, language is so powerful. And, you know, coming from having studied archetypal psychology, and particularly around the work of Carl Jung and the archetypes that he defined in, you know, the early 1900s, really, the traditional language is around the light of archetypes and the shadow, as you mentioned. And because this was created for women, it was created for women in the dynamic of, you know, leadership, whether it's self-leadership or leadership in their work and or business. I wanted to change the language to make it honor those aspects, because the light and shadow still exists, but to make it language that was more relevant to the modern times and the modern woman. So that's why we went with strengths, which is the light aspects, and we went with potential challenges, which is the shadow. Yeah. I also don't like the fact that the word shadow gets a bad rap, and it's often referred to as the negative traits that I have, or the negative characteristics, or the bad things about me. That's the kind of language I've heard people work with regards to shadow. That's not the case. In fact, when we can work with our shadow, when we can acknowledge its role in our lives, in ourselves, when we can understand that without the light, there is, you know, without the shadow, there is no light, and vice versa. Exactly. And we work on really celebrating, understanding, working with all aspects of ourselves, both our light and shadow, or our strengths and our potential challenges. This is when we become embodied and whole. You've got to have the both. And what I often say to people that are big, you know, me, like yourself, I love to work with women who are really ambitious. They've got big dreams, big, bold ideas. They're not here to do something small in the world. They're just not. And so they have a big desire for it to be a big light. Now, the brighter the light that we shine, potentially the larger the shadow that comes with that. Yes. So the depth of potential challenges could be at a greater scale, particularly if you ignore them or try and pretend they don't exist. But equally, the word potential is because when we work on learning about an individual archetype, the challenges that exist in that archetype may not be as dominant or impactful, and certainly may not have any negative impact, because of another archetype a woman will have in her profile. So you and I have each got 4 archetypes. And for anyone listening, of the 12, you could have anywhere between 3 and 6 is the, you know, the average. It's a big broad average, but that's the reality. And a 4 and 5 is what we see mostly in when we're doing profiling and coaching. But you and I have 3 the same, and we have 1 that's different. Sorry, I'm telling a lie. We have 2 that's different.
Yes.
Yes, 2 that's different. But those
2 the same, 2 the different. Yeah.
It's different. I'm adopting your advocate rescuer. I don't want to do that.
I actually love my advocate rescuer. I have come to a place of having so much. I really do love her. I love them all.
Yes.
But yes. I've really come to a place of having deep appreciation and love and value for the advocate rescuer, because she is a beautiful archetype that's here when she's in that
that's
place of self-love and self-advocacy. Incredibly powerful, empowering.
The archetypes that we have the same, have similar traits. They have similar desires. They have similar dreams in the world. But the ones that we have different make the differences that we have so different. Yeah. So that some of the potential challenges that may exist in the Inspire, Believer, and the teachers that we both have may not show up the same for both of us, because we have the influence of other archetypes. That's why the word potential is so key. And I also didn't want women who read my book or did work with a Thrive Factor coach to hear about the challenges and just decide that that was her lot in life, and she was going to have all those things come to be reality, because that's not true.
So powerful, because it's the strengths of the archetypes that actually empower us to be able to view and work with and then move beyond whatever those potential challenges may be for each of us. And also, you know, there is the influence of our own lived experiences as well. That's and our own learning. So yeah, so powerful.
And like you said before, you know, we are not one thing, we are not one label. And I will occasionally have a woman that I'm working with say to me, you know, or is this all I am? You know, with a very kind of a limiting expression to it. And I was like, no, working with them is just the beginning of what's possible, because I'm still discovering new things about them. Every time one of the coaches like yourself is working with the archetypes with your clients or in your programs or your retreats, you're learning new things about the expression of the archetypes. And this is why we have such a tight-knit community with the coaches, so that we can have conversations about what we're all learning and observing, and expand the knowledge base for the archetypes. You know, it was 2009, 2010 when I first started documenting them. So every single time I work with a woman in her archetypes, I potentially learn something new about one or more of them. So no, this is not a label. It's not a limit. This is just the beginning of you, what's possible for you.
Well, that has certainly been my experience in, you know, starting out discovering my archetypes, then meeting you and, you know, in Fiji and running sister circles together and getting to know you better. And then coming back from that and just intuitively knowing that the work that we would do together, what I would learn from you, the study that I would do, and how that could potentially grow in what I had in my mind, what I've always felt and known that I wanted to create a program. And I knew that it needed, you know, it would be based on my, you know, my healing, what I've worked through, you know, how I work with women and what I'm wanting. You know, self-love is just such a huge part of who I am and what I teach in all areas, you know, of the modalities that I do. But I knew in my heart that this would be the added layer that would be able to tie everything together so that I could put something out there. Of course, your liberator, engineer, visionary, creator archetypes greatly supported me in birthing that, in bringing that to fruition. And I just have so much gratitude to you, really. I'm so grateful.
Likewise, you know, this is, everyone's going to be watching, and this is just a big love.
We're just having a love fest.
It's genuine, because for me to see somebody take the work that I began creating so long ago now and have persisted with, particularly in those early few years where, you know, we talked before about, you know, being in our 20s and starting personal development work and people thinking we were a bit weird. Yeah. When I talked about, like, I've been nerding out on archetypes and psychology since my teen years, yeah, so earlier than that even, so over 30 years. And I just didn't talk about it because it was just this weird thing that I did by other people's labeling and judgment, and I didn't need to hide it, but I just focus on learning. You know, I didn't need to share it with the world, and I didn't know that I was going to end up creating my own archetypal framework. But once it got to the point where I did do that, I was like, oh, well, of course, it makes sense, right? But when I first started sharing it, particularly in the business world with women in business and leadership, it was a bit like, what's this weird thing you do? Like, what's an archetype? And now, at least when I use the word archetype, it's more understood, or at least if someone doesn't understand it, they are familiar with it as a word that we use in everyday language, more so than, certainly there are parts of the world where we don't, but more so than there was even 3 or 4 years ago. Which is, you know, is a good thing. But also I'm very conscious of, I've created a community around me of women who talk the archetypes. And we're always, you know, what I'm saying to you coaches all the time is like, make sure we talk about them as the Thrive Factor archetypes, because they are unique in that sense. There are as many well-proven archetypal frameworks there in the world now. And this is different because of its, you know, the way it's been created and the kind of people that we work with this framework. So we need to make sure that it's identified as by its whole name, so that we can make sure people know that it's not just some made up any old other archetypes. Or people often say to me, well, where did you get this from? Or, whose work have you modified? I'm like, I created this on my own. Yes, of course, I've taken on the years of study and, and immersing myself in other archetypal psychology and the different qualifications I have. But in terms of how it works together, the assessment piece that we use, the coaching methodology we use, the names of the archetypes and what they each represent, it is my creation. So I can say that now. It was very awkward to say that for a very long time. That's my visionary creator had to step into that, bringing the future into reality.
And I love that you are now owning that, because it just feels so incredibly empowering. It empowers women to really tap into, know and understand and recognize, their unique gifts and strengths.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's so incredible that you have birthed this into the world, which has allowed me to, in becoming a Thrive Factor profiler and coach. And, even just with the women that I've profiled, just seeing this is what I love, the light bulb moment go on, light up their eyes, where they just have this, oh, I get it. Yes. That makes so much sense. Now I know why I do that. And having them say to me, it's such a relief to know that there's not something wrong with me and I'm not broken.
Yes.
That. And it's like,
yeah.
No, it's just a part of who you are.
I'm not broken. There's nothing missing. I'm not dysfunctional. I don't need so many, and it both excites me that is where women come to, but it also saddens me that they could have lived in their, in their lives, in their physical bodies, in their emotional, their spiritual bodies, their, all that kind of stuff for decades, and have believed that there was something wrong, missing, broken, or needed fixing. Yeah. And no, these are parts of who you are. And we all have, if we want to use the good and bad labels, which I don't like using at all, but we all have parts of ourselves that we like more. We have parts of ourselves that we either dislike or we feel challenged by. That often shows up in the potential challenges, but that doesn't mean that there's something that needs to be sorted with you. Yes, there are certainly situations in the world where we do have challenges and actual diagnosable issues and things, but that still doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you necessarily. And again, I'm drawing my background in counselling and therapy to say that, not just saying it as a random person who thinks I've got right to say that. And it's, this is not a diagnostic tool. This is a self-discovery. It's a self-awareness tool. It's drawing on psychology, though, so ancient psychology. It's not just a made-up kind of thing. Yes, I created it, but as I said before, it's drawing on a depth of continued study, and now, since it was being created, and I've worked with myself, I personally didn't keep count in the beginning, so I would best guess I probably profiled 700 to 800 women around the world these days. So that's a lot of additional observation and documentation, and thank goodness I have the mentor teacher archetype, because she's the one who's been taking notes all these years as the scribe, right? But yeah, it's just such a cool thing, and such an honor to have been able to bring this and to have women like yourself want to get on board and to work with it. So I'm going to put you back in the hot seat now.
All right. Okay.
What's going on here? Because Awaken, as you said, was you wanted to bring a program to life for some time. And this is something that we worked on when I was working with you as your coach and also your mentor, learning the Thrive Factor framework and becoming a coach last year. And it was such an exciting thing to see you go from that I've wanted to do to now I know I can. Yeah. And watching you at the same time really embody your 4 archetypes and see how they could work together in that harmonious place to bring another layer, another depth, another, whole experience to the women that you love to work with in the form of a long-term program that has the pieces of all the things you do, which is so many, alive in that program. And I know that you drew on your own archetypes to be able to do that. And this is one thing that we teach from a business perspective, is that when we are working with women in the world, it is highly likely that about 60 to 70%, sometimes even more, of our archetypes that we have as the person doing the, or like leading the work, or whether it's coaching or healing or whatever that looks like, but about 60 to 70% of our own archetypes will be represented in the community of women that we work with. So that makes it easy to go, well, who do I actually, not target's not really the right word, but who am I inviting into my space and into my community to work with me? And when we show up more of as ourselves, then we're able to express that on a scale which creates that dynamic of what we talk about as magnetism, and the magnetism as an expression is one of those 4 expressions, the 4 M's of momentum: mindset, marketing, money, and magnetism. And everyone listening in can hear the business influence coming through. But, we all have money relationship in the world. We all have mindset relationship in the world. From a marketing perspective, that's about how we show up and, and express ourselves on a personal brand kind of expression. So even if you're not in business, marketing as a term is still relevant. And then magnetism is how we draw in what we want, and also how we repel things that are not right for us. But when we are coming to working with people and inviting people into our space, being able to be more of who we are creates that magnetism dynamic. And so I remember talking to you around just getting back into the essence of the lead archetypes for you that were most important to represent in your program, and letting that bring everything to life is you living your archetypes. Also, you being an incredible role model for the women that you work with who also have those archetypes. So do you want to tell everyone about, well, which one are you going to talk about? One of those archetypes that is really present in the program, in Awaken, and why it was so important to include her?
Well, I mean, I have the 3. So the advocate rescuer, the shapeshifter alchemist, and the inspirer believer. Yeah. I guess for me, the advocate rescuer archetype really comes through in the modules of, self-value, yes, self-focus, self-clarity, self-belief, and self-love. She's, I guess if you could say, those topics are very much driven by her, and the healing work that I've done through that archetype, and even recognizing and understanding her has supported me in even more deeper level of growth, deeper level of understanding, and a deeper sense of confidence and comfortableness in who I am. I can feel the personal growth within myself embodying that archetype, or all of my archetypes. Yeah. And she's such a beautiful, soft, generous, giving, loving archetype. And I attract, many of the women that I work with, many of the women that I coach, many of the women that I teach through my healing modalities who become healers themselves have this archetype.
Which is no surprise, right?
No surprise at all.
But the advocate rescuer being that, well, we always talk about her as the archetype of compassion. She's the Kuan Yin energy, the Mother Teresa energy. She wants to help and heal the world. So there are so many women out there that do identify as healers, as carers, that are going to have this archetype.
Yes.
So she has got so much to give, but the depth of her compassion is usually outwardly focused rather than for self. And that's where I know your learning and your self-healing has taken another layer of a whole different kind of dynamic for you in terms of embodying who you are, by really recognizing that importance of self-compassion and self-advocacy.
Absolutely. And being able to set healthy boundaries and recognizing that, it's not my job, it's not my responsibility to save others and save the world. And it was through that learning, as in having this archetype, that empowered me on levels I never realized or thought could be possible. Like the strength and the courage, and how that has actually influenced, changed, deepened, and strengthened my external relationships. And how I help others is in such a more profound way now, because I'm waiting. That's the key. People come, supporting others when they're ready for it and have asked for it. Yeah.
The advocate rescuer can often find herself in a place where she feels quite hopeless and helpless about the plight of the world and others. And she has a great desire to support causes that she believes in. And what I always teach that those causes could be related to people, to environment, to, you know, to animals, or all three. Usually is the way. She volunteers everywhere. She's always doing things. But her need to help others is so much how she identifies and values herself in the world, about how much she's been able to help other people. And with that, there is also a great desire to be recognized and have genuine appreciations shown. But often she rushes in so quickly to help because she can see the opportunity, she can see where she can make a difference, but she just jumps in so quickly that she overwhelms people who are a bit like, oh, where did you come from? I didn't even ask for your help yet, because they haven't recognized that they actually could benefit from you being in their world, whatever the scenario is. This plays out in our life and also in our work. So therefore, the appreciation that the advocate rescuer so desires is often not given, or not given in the way that she believes it should be, or as quickly as she believes it could be. So this is where there can be this dynamic of the, well, why do I bother helping? And this whole kind of
resentment,
that can show up. Resentment, the martyr, you know, well, I had to say yes because no one else would, or no one else ever does. It's always me. And then people are a bit unsure then about asking you for help, even though they sense, I'm sure that they will sense that it's genuine offer, but depending on your reaction and what you've needed and not been able to give yourself, you know, there's this dynamic that can play out. So this is not the only archetype of the 12 that will identify with that I'm something wrong with me, or I'm, you know, people say I'm needy or I'm too sensitive and see that as a negative thing. There are other archetypes that definitely have this kind of energy about them. But what I see when an advocate rescuer woman can really understand and allow herself to receive self-compassion and to come to a place where she knows what self-advocacy actually means and can express that, she is a powerhouse that you don't want to get in her way, in the best possible way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Reckoned with. And this is it. Well, we talk about her being, you know, Mother Teresa. Like, think about that, you know, Mother Teresa as a literal character in the world, what she was able to accomplish. That's the kind of energy, what's possible when an advocate rescuer woman gets into that space of the embodiment of her strengths and her potential challenges and brings them all together and then leads her life from that perspective.
And that's what's so empowering. And that's what really allows for a woman who has the advocate rescuer archetype to be in her truest essence of leadership, by leading by example, by empowering others and empowering others to do for themselves. And this is why it felt so strong for me personally for her to be in this program, in My Awaken program. Because there is so much there to be gained by women who have this archetype, to lean into that, to embody that, because whether that's they'll be helping, whether it's their family members, their friends, their community, you know, whether it's through business or in the workplace, you know, they're out there doing incredible things. And when they, you know, and for me, recognizing this was one of the biggest shifts in my healing journey and my self-discovery journey, was shifting my focus from external to internal. And I think that's, personally, it is my belief and my observation that is one of the biggest lessons for the advocate rescuer, to learn, to understand, to work through and to embody, is that when you give yourself the recognition, the value and the love and the support that you're seeking and needing so profoundly, that is when you'll have the greatest personal shift in your life.
Most definitely.
And that's, you know, my heart is just like going, as I'm even tuning into that and thinking about that. And of course, my Inspire Believer just wants to support everybody and cheer everybody. We see the goodness of everybody. We see the potential, you know, in each person that we meet. And I'm being mindful of time now, because we can talk about this forever.
we can, but that's okay. I'm sure it's of value.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, And you know, the inspired believer, I just love their energy. I love the energy that she gives to me. It is, I know she is my energy powerhouse.
Yeah.
And I see in so many of the women that I work with, and in, you know, the beautiful groups that I'm in and the business groups that I'm in, and even our community, Shannon, that I'm so grateful to be a part of, you know, they don't always see how inspiring they are to everyone around
Rarely,
them.
in fact, rarely. And what do
Yes.
we often talk about the inspired believer? This is a fiery one. We call her the
Yeah.
cheerleader archetype, but she is, of all of the 12 archetypes, she's the one that is more driven energetically. Again, they all have energy because everything has energy, but this is the one that is more influenced by what's happening from an energetic perspective. She can be the highest of highs, the biggest cheerleader for everyone, want to be an inspiration, but miss the fact that she already is just by showing up in the world. And so it's one of the most humble archetypes that I've birthed and get to teach about. I have this one, so you and I both have this archetype. Every one of the Thrive Factor coaches has the Inspire Believer archetype. 99% of the women I work with have the Inspire Believer archetype. So when I look at my community of women, it's definitely Inspire Believer energy. Women that work in the coaching industry, which is my dominant space, Inspire Believer archetype, because we can see the potential in others, as you explained before, and we have a huge desire for them to see it in themselves, and we will be pestering, we will be annoying, we'll be over the top about what we can see and what we can sense and what we know is possible for somebody else until they get it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now that in itself can be the part that exhausts us. So this is where we need to be very mindful as inspired believers of our energy and what's going on. And I know we joke about this in the Thrive Factor coach community and some of the other groups and things that I lead, where an inspired believer literally 1 minute can be top of her game and be like, the best thing ever just happened to me, and so like wanting to get the pom-poms out and cheering, and the next moment something shifts and she's like, I need to go to bed, like I need to nap for a day, or she gets to the point where she's been on that extreme and that high and feeling so positive and motivated and inspired, and it feels like next thing she flips into, I don't know why I'm bothering this is hopeless.
There's no point. What's the point? I'm tapping out. I'm done.
Yeah. And that's part of the archetype. And this is why we also talk about the importance of having other inspired believers in our community. Because if I'm having one of those moments, I want to reach out to someone who's going to remind me of why I'm here and what I'm doing, and is not going to feed that woe is me kind of energy, knowing that it's a moment in time, what we call them the mojo-less moments. Sometimes those moments are a fleeting moment. Sometimes they're minutes, they're hours, they're days, they're weeks, they're months. But it's having a space around you where you can help have other people remind you of the inspiration you are. And then you can tap back into that greatest gift that the inspirer believer can give herself, which is to be inspired by who she is, what she's creating and what she's putting into the world. And to do that with an energy that's more flowing rather than one extreme or the other.
Yes, having some equilibrium. The word just came to me was equal. Now I can't say it again.
Equilibrium.
That's okay. And that's something that I've really observed with the women in the realms of and fields that I work in. And some of my beautiful soul sisters who have so much incredible value to offer this world. And, I can see that they have potentially the inspire believer archetype. I can hear the words. I can, especially about losing mojo and what's the point and everything else. And what I can see in the challenging aspect of that is that they're not potentially working within or embodying all of the archetypes.
Not at all.
And that archetype. And rather than working with that and understanding that and learning and embodying more about that so they can draw on the strengths to then work through that and support themselves to grow and move through that, they've given up and withdrawn. Yeah. And that, my heart, that breaks my heart, because I'm like, you have so much. This is my inspire believers speaking, I know, but they have so much to give the world. And it doesn't have to be on a collective scale, just in that niche, in that area that they're wanting to work in. But instead, they've completely disconnected disconnected from themselves, disconnected from the work that they wanted to do, the people they wanted to work with, or even just in their community and their families. And that saddens me. It really does.
I know. Well, I know it does, because I have I live with the Thrive Leader Archetype also. And being in the space of having been in, the coaching industry or the coaching world for over 15 years, and then with, counseling and therapy before that, and being even in corporate in a coaching leadership kind of role, I've always been the one who's like, but you just did there, or can you see what's possible? And people go, no, but that's just what I do. And the inspired believer can get incredibly disappointed, which again is an energy sucker. See people just not owning that, not stepping in, again, abdicating from their incredible potential and their, what we can see as possible for them. We get very overwhelmed, we can get very saddened, and we can really have an impact on their energy. So this archetype is incredibly influential if you have her in your profile, and again, majority of your clients will. So majority, excuse me, of my clients do also. So it's being mindful of that. And when you've decided that it's not worth bothering anymore with whatever the thing is that you were so excited about not that long ago, tune in and really give yourself a reality check as to why you feel that, what's going on. Because I would suggest that it's highly likely your inspired believer influencing you. And as quick as she can go from high to low, she can go back to high again. So this is why we want to know, how do we support our energy? How do we remind ourselves of what we are doing and the contribution we are making in the world, so that you can keep showing up and doing that in a way where you feel energized by it, not drained by it.
Yes, which is why it felt so, again, powerful for her to be represented in My Awaken program. And, and then there's the Shapeshifter Alchemist, which, she's one of my favorites. I've always loved anything to do with magic. I've always been drawn to
magical mystic.
Everything, and I can see where she has, played out so hugely in my own life, in my own life, in the roles that I've had, in my ability to be able to shift and morph and change and adapt and be flexible in all and every situations. That's why, my resume and my roles, even in all of the work that I've done in my previous leadership roles, in, management roles, in all of the work that I've done and how I've been guided, I guess, to undertake, the healing modalities, teaching meditation, coaching, all of that, even though there's so much, I guess, of what I now do, underneath all of that, there is the desire to reconnect women to their divine feminine, to their own divine power, to reconnect them to their higher self, their own intuition, tapping into all of that. And I can really see how my Shapeshifter Alchemist archetype has influenced me in all of that. And I know there
is an archetype who thrives on variety and change and having different...
Can get bored.
Yeah, can get bored very quickly. Let's just say that. It is both, again, a challenge, and one of the greatest gifts that the Shapeshifter Alchemist has is how diverse she is in her thinking, in her learning, in her expression in the world. So the fact that you have so many different modalities and lived and learned experiences to draw on brings a depth of richness to your program and your work that others are not going to be able to bring forward. The way that you've been able to distill it together so that it makes sense is the gift of the Shapeshifter Alchemist, because some Shapeshifter Alchemists don't ever get to the point where they can see how all the things that they have done and continue to do, because they'll keep adding more things in, how that actually relates together. Like, how does it join from here to here and here to here, and how that all works. So there's a harmonious, mystical, magical experience, the alchemical, self-transformation, which is really what happens. And so therefore you'll see Shapeshifter Alchemists feeling like they're wafting around the world, never really feeling like they belong anywhere, like anything makes sense to them. They chop and change, and they'll look at that as a negative, judgment on themselves. I can't stick at one thing. I always need something new. I drop things before I've even started them. And again, society in which we live, in the Western world particularly, is very critical and judgmental of people that don't stick at the thing, you know, the one thing or whatever someone else has decided is the thing we need to be doing. So the shapeshifter alchemist doesn't know how to do that. She needs to have variety in her world. And from, you know, from a life and business and work perspective, she needs to have different things going on so that she feels fulfilled and interested, because she does get bored very, very quick. She also, it's important for her to understand and own the power that exists in the magical aspect that she brings to the world. You know, magic is her grounding. And anyone who's watching this that doesn't have this archetype will just have probably gone, that doesn't make sense. How can magic be a grounding thing? And yet it is. And every shapeshifter alchemist I've ever profiled was like, really? Like, I can do more things that are magical? Yes, do more things that are magical. Yeah. And other women that don't have that archetype think that's the strangest thing they've ever heard. I'm not speaking to them. I'm speaking to the shapeshifter alchemists. And, you know, as long as shapeshifter alchemists get it, that's the most important thing, because being able to ground into the gifts that you have with that archetype. As I said, it's the the guidance of alchemical transformation for yourself and for others, that taking something of seemingly little or no value and turning it into something of incredible wealth on a self scale. You know, you can't replace the incredible gift that is, you know, for somebody to go through that experience for themselves because they have this archetype or are supported by somebody who does.
She's certainly absolutely one of my favorites. And I love that I've been able to take the wisdom and the knowledge that I now have, thank you, so grateful to you, of these beautiful archetypes, the self-understanding, my own personal journey, my professional journey, and to be able to, you know, bring in elements of all of my modalities into this program. You know, there's the Thrive Factor Archetypal Psychology, there's, you know, even my theta healing modality, there's, you know, my coaching modalities, there's meditation, there's everything. There's all the elements of what I have tried and tested. And I guess this is something too that, and I feel this is an influence of the mentor teacher as well, is I've always had the belief that, and you know, whenever I hear or learn or discover something new, I go, all right, universe, I've got this thing here. I've got this new concept, this new idea. I'm actually going to put it on. I'm going to try it on. I'm going to walk it. I'm going to talk it. And if I see and experience and feel results, then I feel confident and comfortable in actually sharing this with somebody else. And, you know, and I don't teach what I actually I haven't done, haven't tried, haven't tested.
Place of your lived experience that is the layering on top of your learned experience, which is the richness that the mentor teacher brings to the world. You know, we call her the wisdom woman. You know, she has an incredible innate wisdom, but it doesn't mean she's owned that. Again, it's often something she can abdicate from and think she has to go and do more courses and more things and get pieces of paper and qualifications and things to prove what she already knows. But because of that, she does know a lot, and coming to that point of turning that knowledge and that lived and learned experience and the wisdom into something that she can then share with others is so phenomenal. And that's what you've done with Awaken. And I'm not surprised that the women have taken the program with you so far, had such an incredible experience. And I know that anyone that's coming into your next round and all the subsequent rounds that you're going to lead the Awaken program is going to have her own enriched experience of awakening into who she is. And you said earlier, right at the beginning, that you felt like it was a coming home, and a reawakening. And that's all those things is how someone could potentially feel when they do this kind of work and commit to the self-discovery. It's just such an incredible thing. And we're going back to, as we said, the questions that we all have, the universal questions of who am I? What am I here to do? And what you've included in your Awaken program is going to help women who are seeking answers to those to stop needing to seek answers, because they will know.
Well, I have to say that it is one of the proudest mama moments I've had, really, if we can use those words and put it in that context, because it really felt like I was birthing something that I had long been waiting for and bringing it into the world. And I'm just so grateful that, the work that I've done with you, the work that I've done within the Thrive Factor framework really supported me in being able to bring this together and enabling and allowing me to support other women who I know are going through what I've been through, have been where I've been through, and are now ready to take those next steps to be supported. You know, I didn't feel supported when I was going through this, and to be able to offer that support to other women who are actually ready to get to know themselves on a deeper level and really take back some power, really feel empowered. It excites me. And so we do start. Sorry.
I said, so it should excite you.
Yes, I'm very, very excited. So yeah, we do start. Enrollments are now open. Our first welcome call is on Tuesday, the 7th of September at 7:30 p.m. I am keeping the enrollments open for another week. And, you know, I'm so proud of this. I know, Shannon, you have just been such a brilliant supporter, and I have such a deep knowing within myself of the power, the potential power that this has to positively change the lives of women who sign up for it and join me. And, you know, a lot of the magic also takes place in the beautiful conversations and mentoring calls that we have throughout the 4-month period. So it's not just contained within the online program. There's so much magic that happens in the mentoring calls.
I think if there's anybody who's interested in sort of hovering around the edges of do I do this now, or I'm busy, or shall I wait, I would just get them to, you know, ladies, think about the fact that starting this now means that by the end of this year, you have a whole different sense of self to start a new year with next year. So I think it's such a pivotal, powerful time to be doing this. And equally, if for some reason it's not right for you right now, stay in Karen's world, because I know that this program isn't going anywhere. I know, because having walked with her in the journey to birth this, you know, it's too valuable for her to say, I'm not doing it anymore. So it's, you know, it's here to stay. So stay in her world and see what else, you know, there is to dabble in and to join, or, you know, while you get yourself ready to do Awaken. But don't wait. If you get a sense of this is right for me, just jump in.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you so much. And ladies, if you're watching, I haven't taken any notice of the comments just with the internet connection. So I'll go back. If you have commented, Shannon and myself actually might reply to those comments. Please get in touch. I'm happy to have a chat with you. I'll pop the link in the comments. I would absolutely love you to join us. It's so exciting. So have a wonderful day. Thank you, Shannon. I could talk with you so often for so long about all things Thrive Factor. You have really, you know, thank you. Love you so much, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.